Right. Moving on to New York City tips. So, you are thinking about planning, you're thinking about coming to New York, you are concerned about the pricing and how expensive rent is becoming, and you would really like to know what people in New York are going through or what their experience was when moving. I think that I also should sort of preface this by saying I am someone who grew up here and already had a knowledge of different neighborhoods, what I wanted to be. I also know that me as a person, I'm not interested in like being right up on the bars or going out to the bars, going out to the clubs, or anything like that. And that sort of helped inform which neighborhood I was open to moving to. And I also want to note that I moved here from a relocation through my work. So I had support in that way. I also want to note that I have family here as well. And I think that was, even though like I'm not living with my mom or wasn't going to live with my mom or my grandparents or her family or things like that, them being able to help me and sort of view places while I wasn't here, that was another, having family here was another, factor and privilege of me sort of being able to move in a seamless way. But I did want to share some tips that helped me that I think could help you too in your moving to New York City process. First is, and this may not be something that someone has control over, but I would, if you have a time to pick anytime you move, I would say move in the off season. So move in the winter. New York City in the summer is such a freaking, it's a hot time to move. So I knew that if when I like started, and I started my job in like December, and they were like, oh, we're gonna need you to come and we want you to be on site, when the office opens back up again. My office still hasn't really opened back up again. But I was like, okay, cool. Well, then I'll probably plan to move in, I was planning on moving in either February or March. And I ended up moving in February because I had a feeling that once it started warming up, then it would be even more competition. So while there is less of an apartment inventory in the winter, there's also potentially less people who are looking because no one wants to move in the cold. And they're also like, I know there are a lot of like colleges and schools and all that stuff, but not necessarily people have their own dorms and stuff. So a lot of people, who may be coming from college are moving into the city, in the summer. People who are, coming into new roads or moving in the summer, tourists or people, from other countries maybe be moving in during the summer. Either way, yeah, definitely try moving during the winter. I also want to note that I think that this like rule of moving in the off season is a little bit different now because of COVID. I think that there are many people like last year, and I wasn't here in the summer, but I mean, I think that people moving back or who are coming back into the pandemic are going to be coming into New York no matter what season. So I will be mindful of that. It's like, it still may be competitive. When I was looking for places, and like when I was looking for places, it was definitely challenging, but I felt like it was a little more challenging than it needed to be for the winter, if that makes sense. Which gave me an indication that like if I waited until the spring and the summer, it'd probably be so much worse. Like, because the areas that I wanted were like being picked up like nothing. So yeah, move on the off season if you can. I saw this video years ago from yeah, I think it was a few years ago, and I was watching this video, and it was a pest control person talking about where he wouldn't live in New York. And he mentioned, and it stuck with me, but he mentioned that he wouldn't live in places that were across the street from the park. He wouldn't live in places that were right near restaurants, and he wouldn't live in old buildings. So I would pretty much say to prioritize places that are not near parks, that are not older buildings, and that are not by food sources. The older building thing in New York is definitely a rule that you may have to ignore, because it's New York. Old buildings are everywhere. And I'm not necessarily saying that you can 100% avoid pests. Like, I live in an older building, and it's not that old. I live in an older building, and there's definitely pests around. I think that's just the nature of New York. But I think it is a tip that is useful. Like, I personally wouldn't want to live in right off of a restaurant, but I think everyone's priorities are different. But that is a tip, to prioritize buildings that are not near parks, that are not near food restaurants, and that are old. Third, when I posted my moving back to New York City, I had people asking, tips for where to live in Manhattan or where to live in New York City. And I feel like the biggest tip that I have for that is just to be aware, the closer, Manhattan is sort of the epicenter of everything. So that is where it will be the most expensive. So the further away from Manhattan you go, the less expensive it will be. And I mean, you see it now. It's average rent is $5,000 in Manhattan, but in places like Brooklyn, it's a little less. In places in Queens, it's even less than Brooklyn. And that is, I think, that's the biggest sort of thing, is you just sort of need to prioritize what it is that you want. And if the prices are too high, then the prices shouldn't be that high to begin with. But if the prices are too high, then it means maybe relinquishing one of the requirements on your list and seeing what you can get elsewhere. I personally have no desire to live in Manhattan other than the Upper West Side. But yeah, I get that it is definitely the main place that people want to be. But I would just keep that in mind. It's if you want to pay less, then you should look outside of the epicenter of the city. And then also it's check out Staten Island, check out Jersey, check out Yonkers, upstate New York too. There are places that's accessible via trains and ferries. It's not just the main subway lines that you can take or don't have to take or everything like that. So definitely expand your options and prioritize what you want. The last tip I have is just to utilize apps and apartment searching apps like Street Easy, Zillow, whatever, as a tool. One thing that I did when I first started searching was just sort of looking at buildings that I was interested in, that was in my looking at buildings that were in my neighborhood, and identifying who the leasing agents were and the brokers, and looking to see if those leasing agents and brokers had websites, so that way you have constant, you can set up notifications and have contact with those people directly if something comes up. And I will also say, don't even reach out to them when something is posted on the website. Reach out to them beforehand and let them know what you're looking for. May be aware of apartments that are coming up in a month or so, or yeah, like a month out from when you move. And they may be able to share it, and it may not even be posted or anything like that. So that is what I have. I feel like so much of this has already been shared, but I wanted to provide my insight. And I hope that like this has been somewhat helpful. And if you have any more questions or anything like that, I am happy to answer them. But I am going to head out, and I will see you next time. I hope that you have a great day. Bye.
She said she the one, I bet she thinks she is. Saying don't have no trust, I don't know where you been. I need a break.